I became a teacher because I believed it should be different than what I experienced. And I believed the child's experience should be joyful, and that from the very earliest moments, we need to reassure children that learning is exciting, that someone who looks different than you isn't scary, that person is interesting. Let's find out more about them. I do a lot of cultural classes with young kids through children's books and through cultural arts and different things. But I think that cultural piece is something that needs to be brought in here when we're talking about changing the educational system and changing the trajectory or the focus within the educational system. Is that, but things don't change quickly in education. As we move forward, and I think as people of color and multicultural portions of our country are starting to be heard and starting to be respected as equals, I think that has done more to change how we acknowledge social emotional learning or the need for it in the classroom, because for all too long, it was, the focus was just on one way of life, one theory, one thing being the right way to do it.
So it sounds like you're answering one of my other questions about is there equity and inclusion in social and emotional learning?
Hopefully. I mean, go ahead, love.
I'm writing notes on the side, trying to make sure I give everyone a chance to talk, because as you can see, I'm so full of SEL. I put it in the chat. So I said, what you piggyback on Jennifer, what you were saying about and Sheila, you went on to diversity, and I thought about social awareness, which is when you do social emotional learning and you learn it for yourself. I always try to teach people to refer back to the wheel, and I don't have it in front of me. But anyway, go back to the wheel. So that's about social awareness, and under social awareness, diversity is there, right? And in diversity, when I teach the classes, we not only discuss race, but we discuss diversity in thought. And that's the aha moment, diversity in thought, because race is not always race, it's class a lot of times. So, yes, there is diversity. Social emotional learning is not about, is there diversity in social emotional learning? The diversity would be, how far reaching is it being taught? Is it taught in urban districts? Is it taught in rural districts? All it needs is a vehicle. Social emotional learning is for everyone. It doesn't need to be changed, except for maybe you want to, what is it? You want to, West Virginia it, you want to make it good for West Virginians. You want to California it. You want to Michigan it. You want to Southern it.
And you should.
Yeah, but
because you wanted to speak to that group.
Yes, the 5 competencies are never changing. They're universal. They are good for the soul. Linda, SEL is universal.
I like that diversity of thought. Yeah.
And Linda, this takes me to another, I was telling you about my alternate definition for bravery. And I kind of wish that one of your pictures, you had devoted a page to tolerance. I typically hate using the word tolerance, because unless you're talking about an older sibling putting up with a baby who's like pulling their hair. Okay, I'm tolerating you because you're a member of my family. But in my experience, people use tolerance when they're talking about race or class or other separating type of ideas. And in my experience, the way it's used is, well, I'm going to allow you to be here, even though I know I'm better than you are. Okay. So when I taught for 20 years in the classroom, I never used the word tolerance. I used the word respect, because that's truly what SEL is: acknowledging and respecting someone's feelings, whether they're similar to yours or they're not, or their outlook. That's respect. It's not tolerance, it's respect.
Well, see, that sounds like it in a nutshell. 50 years ago, that's what I was taught, to respect the feelings of others.
Well, I was taught that too, but I was in an all white. I was surrounded all the time by only people who looked like me. So that message didn't really translate the way I think it needs to be translated.
Oh, okay. Well, I was raised in an integrated environment, but yeah, that was one of respect others, respect, the Jews who live down the street, all that. Yeah.
But
Okay.
it was what do they call that? What's that word when you say something but you don't really do it? What's that word? Because in church,
Hypocritical.
hypocritical, because we get taught that. I don't know about how your Black community was, Linda, but my Black community, say for instance, I was in church. I started going to church as a teen, but I learned the lessons. And in the Baptist church, I don't know about everybody else's, the only people that can be trusted are those who believe in Jesus. See? So you might respect everybody, but only if they are of Jesus Christ. If they have not been saved and don't even think about, they don't even have opinions that matter. All right. So you might be taught to respect everyone what they thought, but the church tell you if they ain't Christian or Christ-like or giving their whole life to my Lord and Savior, then they're do not sit in the seat of counsel of the ungodly. Right. So it's hypocritical to say I'm raising you to say that you other opinions matters, but deep down the church has hidden in your heart that they don't matter. Only those of us who love Christ.
It's those hidden messages.
Oh yeah,
you know, battling beneath the water that you can't see. The duck is quacking, but
one of the big components in a school setting that makes social and emotional learning impactful is the relationships. When relationships are done, when teachers get to know their students. And one of the things I talk to teachers about is the importance of getting to know their students. And that's different from getting nosy with your students, because they think because they get intel or information that's getting to know their students. And and I have to tell them, no, you're just being nosy because you went home in the house last night.
What a distinction.
Yeah, but getting to know them is understanding their background, where they come from, why they show up the way they do on a daily basis, whether they're showing up angry, whether they're showing up tired, whether they're showing up hungry. That's getting to know them versus judging them and just being nosy and having conversation in the teacher's lounge.
So that triggers empathy then in the teacher?
Absolutely. Empathy, definitely triggers empathy, but it also helps with that cultural competence, that you're not putting on them your values when it comes to SEL and developing those relationships, because where the wraparound center is located, and we also have 4 public schools in this zip code. It's the most economically distressed zip code in the entire state of Illinois. No grocery stores, high crime, high unemployment rates, high poverty, all of those demographics that go along with it. But those students are showing up to school every day. So you have to get to understand them. Now, if we did a poll on our teachers, 5 out of the 100 live in this community. So you don't understand that. But it also doesn't make you an ineffective teacher. But also I'm asking you to get to know them and understand them, that they may not be putting their head on their desk just to be disrespectful. You have to understand they may really, this is the only place they feel safe to put their head down and get some rest. So you have to get to know them.
That's a good point.
Yeah. So, but I feel like that's the impact. One of our high school, Manual High School, which is located in the zip code as well, their graduation rates are improving because of this relationship piece, getting to know them, knock on their doors. One of the positive of COVID was when we had to go to 100% remote learning.
Yeah.
So that was eye-opening for our teachers, because that was the first time they've been to their house and they can see in the house. They can hear what the environment was like. They could see, because when that bell rings, they go home. And the student was absent, they were absent. There was no knocking on the doors, getting to know where they live.
So your teachers went to the homes of the students?
No, I'm talking through Zoom. I'm talking through Teams.
I'm sorry.
That was the closest they've been to see in the house and see what that environment is like.
Okay.
And so you don't really get to know. They show up and you just automatically think they came from a comfortable environment. So there's little things like 50% of the properties in this zip code are either abandoned, vacant lots, or boarded up. Our students are walking home from school to home, and this is what they're exposed to. And so that's traumatizing to many of us. So as staff, we have to understand that what's coming into our classroom. And so I think ultimately my point is that is what helps build cultural competence. And then having those PLCs where teachers can have these conversations and because it creates an environment where you can, typically when you have conversation, you bring up diversity, cultural competence, implicit bias, defenses go up, because in their minds, you're calling them racist. But when they can have those conversations around colleagues, to understand where those blind spots or those biases are, it ultimately helps. And when those type of things are taking place, to answer your original question, it's having a positive impact on our students.
and your community.
Absolutely.
Because I mean, that's a lot of what we deal with. So because we rely so heavily on community volunteers to be the message bearers into the classrooms around the community, well, it's a pretty big responsibility. You know, a lot of nonprofits ask you for a couple of hours a year, right, as a volunteer. We require our volunteers to make a 9-month commitment that they promise they will visit the same classroom on the same day and same time every single week. And they will go in there prepared with 2 or 3 books that they have researched and gotten from the library beforehand to engage kids in stories and talking about conversations about the books. And, you know, because having that kind of time available that you can commit a 9-month block of time is a pretty privileged person that can fill that slot, right? So, you know, we started out 20 years ago with all of our volunteers were older white women mostly. I can tell my bridge club that I did something nice, you know, or whatever. When I started out as a volunteer with this organization 2 years ago, and when I came in and took my position, I said, they're gone, okay? Because that's the last thing we need is people going in there, and because they're judging these kids, right? Whether they know it or not. They're saying, they would come back to the office and say, well, these kids they just refuse to sit still. These kids, blah, blah. And I kept saying, okay, you're out.
You know, Sheila, that gives a segue to a thought that I'm developing over here. I wrote it down. I think there should be tiers to learning SEL and then cultural competency and diversity. I think if you teach SEL, a comprehensive series in 4 to 6 weeks or something like that, say for instance, those women who got kicked out, perhaps they should get or moving forward, volunteers might want to get a comprehensive SEL class series, then go into teaching culture and diversity. Because once you open them up with new perspectives with SEL and empathy and all that self-reflection, I think people can't get into culture and diversity and looking at that part of themselves unless they've been first opened up with the safe tools of SEL. I've been saying that for, since this season in America that we having all this racial unrest. Dr. Joy DeGury wrote a book and has a theory called post-traumatic slave syndrome. And so you would think that, and I spent some time studying with her and following her. She was in my area for a while, and I spent like a week, and it was wonderful. So here's the deal. You talk about the kidnapped African that has this post-traumatic slave syndrome, right? Where all the guilt and the poor psychology and poverty. But what she opens us up to entertain is that we never talk about the white people who were there at a lynching and did not like it, who had to go home with the guilt in their hearts and couldn't speak about it because they would say they're a traitor of their race. Then you take that guilt and that anger generationally, and how are they raising their kids with this guilt and anger that they don't really want to be this racist, but this is what their whole family system has been doing for 400 years. But so it not only talks about the stress of the African in America, the kidnapped African, it's about what white people who've been on the same journey. We were here at the same time. I say we because I believe my family is from the heritage of the 400-year slave trade in the United States. White folks had to deal with that too. And it has not been easy to be a hateful racist because your race said you must do it. And so white people also living with their the after effects of what America is. Everyone knows it was hell. It was a big crime that was committed, but you can't even admit it to yourself. So you can't even admit what has happened to your race. And now you have to go and engage with these other people where deep in your heart, consciously or subconsciously, you might have feelings of guilt and resentment because, all type of weird stuff that your group will not allow you to work through. So once you get SEL, it does not attack that part of you. It opens you up for anything. And then perhaps you can go into diversity and culture analysis.
So we started requiring our volunteers to come in and do these kind of social justice or just social awareness types of activities with us. And we made it a requirement. And if you didn't get involved in these at least once a year, then you were put on, like super secret, top secret probation or something. And you were given a warning that, if you don't if you don't get on board with our new requirements, you know. And so at that point, a lot of people said, well, I shouldn't have to do that. And I'm like, well, that's your choice, you know.
Self-reflection is
So
hard. Deep
we
self-reflection
have
is hard.
educated a lot of people, and that's why I said to Derek, you know, you're not just changing those teachers' lives or the kids' lives, you're teaching that your community, you are changing your community by engaging people to see from outside themselves.
Yeah.
And that's what the world needs, right?
Sure.
If we
Absolutely.
are ever going to find a peaceful way to coexist in this world, we need to start seeing the world through other people's eyes and feeling and connecting with them as equal human beings
Mhm.
That's
in
good.
order to develop empathy.